I see we're on here. Thank you to our person who is facilitating our live stream here. We're going to be trying to multitask.
Right.
So we got an audience here, then we got audience here. So we're going to try to do our best. Listen, if you're looking on StreamYard and you're filling up the information that's coming through, please make sure you post your questions. We're going to do our best to make sure that we answer questions as they come through. Go ahead and post and share this stream with your friends or with your audiences if you're on social media. And we look forward to an awesome conversation. We're getting ready to kick it off live here shortly. All right. Let me share. Here we go. We're on in a minute. Good afternoon, audiences and churches and pastors and prelates and apostles and bishops all throughout the reach of Hallelujah, Tallahassee Highest Praise 95.3 FM. You are tuned in to the Greg James Community Show and the Conscious Check broadcast with Christy Henry. I am so glad to have you all join us today. And if you're listening in, no, this is not Greg James, but I play him on TV maybe, if I could. I am so blessed to be able to have joining me today in the absence of Pastor James, our co-host and our Make It Plain facilitator today, the Reverend Pastor Rudy Ferguson of Newburgh Tabernacle Praise over in the north side.
That's what's up. You see it. That's what we say. That's what's up. Make it plain.
Make it plain,
That's
y'all.
It.
And listen, as we talked earlier, Pastor Ferguson, we're going to have to make a lot of things plain today, right?
Y'all got to tune on to this one. Tune in.
Y'all, listen, we got a lot of high-level stuff. And it's interesting, right?
Right.
Because everybody needs a job.
Right. Everybody
needs a job.
Sometimes two.
But it's hard to understand how you go about making a job available for someone to be able to have access to, right?
I agree.
Because people just think work happens.
Right.
Work just don't happen.
It don't.
Right? Work don't just happen.
No, it don't.
How you know work? How does work happen? When you were younger, you were free labor, right? You got up in the morning, you did what your mom and dad told you to do. In exchange, you had
to go to work.
You went to work. You
right.
had food. They fed you. They clothed you.
Right. And it always didn't result in money.
It didn't always result in money.
9 out of 10, it didn't come with no money.
But when you were a child, you spake as a child, and when you became a man,
I got a job. That's how that works.
So that's why today's conversation is so important because, first of all, it's really interesting how, this great, they call it the great walk. What they call the great resignation, right? Where the nation, where everybody's just leaving their jobs, right? They're looking for opportunity elsewhere. Traditional structures of employment just don't serve the people no more. I'm tired of this McDonald's job that's paying me only $12 an hour. Back in the day, when I had you could be working at McDonald's till you're 60 years old. You can retire from McDonald's.
You sure could.
But ain't nobody retiring from McDonald's
no more. Ain't nobody doing that no more. Those days are long gone.
They don't retire from the state no more.
About retirement no more. That's a conversation.
Well, that might be some of what's, but I think at the end of the day, the idea of employment has changed.
I agree.
Right?
Right.
And so I think it's really interesting how today's conversation is going to really explore how that has changed,
Right.
how that has changed here locally, and how does that factor into opportunity here? Because as you said earlier, you still need a job.
Still need a job. Still need a job.
Still.
Welcome to America.
What?
You need a job. Okay.
What the scripture say? A man don't work,
You don't eat. You don't work, you don't pay the light bill either. That's just how that works.
So how does this factor into economic development?
Let's talk about
right?
that. Right.
Okay. And I think that it's important that we set forth the purpose of the Conscious Shake broadcast. Hey, y'all, thank y'all for tuning in. Let us know that y'all are here. Thank you to our Facebook stream, Facebook audiences that are tuning in. We see y'all raising y'all hands. Hello. We need y'all to ask some questions because I'm telling you, it's going to get real up in here in a minute. We need to understand that the basis of a thriving economic system is contingent upon the availability of labor.
Right.
And in this climate, it has to be a skilled labor force. Because
agree.
ain't nobody out there picking cotton on the side of the road for free no more.
Nope.
You gotta have a skill, you gotta have, and with the parallel factors, right, of stuff getting more expensive.
Right.
Housing is more expensive.
Right.
Living is more expensive.
Right.
Breathing is more expensive.
Of course.
Right. And so you got to be able to balance that work
Right.
with the viability that comes from the income that you generate from that work. So that's why our conversation today is so important.
I
But
agree.
I want people to sit right here, right? But when we're going to get our work, got two guests we're going to introduce to y'all. And listen, I know sometimes, Pastor Ferguson, we just don't give people they do.
No, we don't.
But we're going to laud them podium style here today.
That's it.
So folks sometimes need to know who they talking to.
That's right. We're going to sit behind the sacred desk.
The sacred desk.
Yeah.
The sacred desk.
Yeah.
You better say that. That was good. I felt that in my spirit when you said the
I
sacred
felt it
desk.
too. Almost
So listen, we are going to be coming back in a moment. We're going to introduce our guest today. We're talking economic development 101. Workforce development, economic vitality, and local opportunity in our market. Stay tuned, get your questions ready, and get a pen and paper because you're going to have to write some stuff down.
Yes.
All right, stay tuned there.
That was good.
Okay, good people.
Okay.
If you're listening live and you're streaming on Facebook, you might see something you might not need to see, but that's all right. That's the benefit of streaming live.
That's it.
We have all of our guests here. We're going to formally introduce them. But if you're streaming live and you want to call with your question, you can call in at 850-671-1450. Again, our call-in line here is 850-671-1450. And hey, we're going to dig into it in just a moment. So stay tuned and get your questions ready.
That's what's up.
All right, good people.
All right. This is good.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers, for making it.
I'm
I
sorry.
hope all is well.
Yeah,
Good to see you, Mr.
good to
Bowers.
see you too.
Long time no see.
I know.
Sing this to some people.
I know, right? I
Don't
know. It's been a
I
while.
tell you, Tallahassee is not that big. I don't know how I missed y'all. I
Yeah.
don't know how I did it. I think I might have saw you at Walmart, Kim. I think at one
Oh, you
point-
saw me in
From a
Walmart.
distance.
Oh,
I think I might have saw you at
yeah.
Walmart. I think I might have saw you.
If you see me at Walmart, somebody's holding me hostage.
Walmart's not your thing.
Listen,
A lot of people say that, but I'm that way with like Target. I'm like,
Really?
Because
I don't like talking. At Walmart, I can go in. I know what I want.
I have an expect. I know what it's gonna be. I'm just going. I self check out. They removed that part, and yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Have Freddy figures.
That's another person we didn't get in touch with. You got the gala coming up again? Yeah. Recipient.
Yeah. Current. Yeah. Upcoming. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Congratulations.
Yes.
So we are glad and thankful for our guests being here today. If you just tuned in, you're with Conscious Check with Christy Henry and Pastor Rudy Ferguson for
Yo,
our January Economic Development one-on-one conversation where we're focusing on workforce development, business opportunity, and local innovation here in our local community.
yes.
So listen, I think that, like we said before, it's really important for people to understand who's in the room.
Right.
Because when you're having a high-level conversation, you need some high-level people in the room.
I think we've gotten there too.
I know, so I'm finna embarrass some folk, right? Because I love to do that. We have with us today, and I'm gonna say this, the city didn't say this, the county didn't say this, but I'm just gonna say this. We have in the room our Chief Economic Development Officer. He goes by the title of Director of the Tallahassee Leon Office of Economic Vitality. But I think that when you think of Keith Bowers, you have to kind of go back on the resume, right? I followed Keith's career all the way back to when he was doing affordable housing redevelopment over in Carolina Oaks with the Bethel Baptist Empowerment. Yeah, that's right. And he went over there behind the homeless shelter and created a whole community.
Yes, he did.
He got the state to align with that community and make it designated a front porch community along with other city and county partners. And he was so hot that they took him on to Florida Housing, where he served as a manager of one of their single family housing development programs and was a instrumental part of making sure that there was what we now call equity in place represented in that particular agency on the state level. And from there, of course, he just got hotter. Went on ahead to the Florida FAMU Small Business Development Center, became the executive director over there. Tremendous work working with contractors, ensuring that information, capacity building, bonding for contractors and other relevant industries were made available to communities of color in all communities. And a part of that broad network and just did phenomenal work over there, particularly looking at what you were able to do for businesses during the time of COVID. And really solidifying and stabilizing to a great degree a lot of folks who wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for the advocacy that happened through the small business development team there at FAMU. So we are really appreciative now, lauding you in your newest title as director of our city and county's Office of Economic Vitality, which is funded directly through the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency for the next 20 years to be a leadership entity of economic development, innovation, and attraction for our community. Did I say it? Did I say it right? Did I make it clear? Okay. Was that all right?
Yes.
Did I get everything okay? All right.
That deserved an organ right there. That was good.
I'm gonna have to take you everywhere.
I got you. I have hype chick services on my resume. But seriously, just extremely a fan of your work, a fan of your advocacy, and really appreciate your heart toward the community. It's been displayed in everything that you have done, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
And following in line with that, another big heartbeat, and Dr. Kim Moore, Dr. Kim Moore, not the Reverend Doctor, but the Dr. Kim Moore, who serves as the Vice President for Workforce Innovation at Tallahassee Community College. This one right here, I follow her too, right? Because I follow people. One of the youngest CEOs of our local career source agency, right? Throughout the state network.
Right.
In her work, did so much to make sure that she bridged gaps, brought career training. I mean, really innovated in a lot of spaces other than just being an unemployment agency that people just came to when they had nowhere else to go, right?
Absolutely.
It became more than just a retraining work connectivity. You saw it as a centrifuge of opportunity and attainment for the community. And in that role, you were able to transition very well into your current capacity because you understood that if people don't have the skills necessary to be able to experience economic attainment, then it would continue to feed this kind of regressive, vicious cycle of survival. I don't even call it poverty anymore because people they're not like poor like they used to be poor. So when people used to be poor, they surviving, right? And in addition to that, you have served as trustee of FAMU's board of directors. You served as president and chair of our local research and development authority. You helped them get millions of dollars worth of grants through your work. You're working with the Leon County Sheriff's Office to provide gateway for employment opportunity for people that are experiencing re-entry. You developed programmatic approaches, and now you with your friends have founded a toll charter school at Tallahassee Community College, because it wasn't enough to just work with the adults, right? They're trying to get to the children,
That's
right? And so I just think that we have to give our flowers where they are due. And the thing I love about having you both here as guests is because you're not just figureheads on a sheet of paper.
That's right.
You are policy agents. You are not just even policy agents. You create the policy, then you execute with your team the policy that you create
That's it.
based upon your recommendations. So you're highly respected nationally, locally. It's just an honor to have you here. And so I just want to give you space and room and safety to be who you are.
That's right.
And like I told Pastor Ferguson when we talked earlier, these are some very high level conversations.
Yes.
But we got to make it plain.
Power to the people. You gotta get power to the people.
We got to make it plain.
You gotta make it plain.
We gotta make it plain. So I am so excited to have you both here. But I'm going to start out first of all by just kind of giving you an opportunity to provide an overview of your work and the role of your agency and institution in supporting what I call the economic health of our local community. And anyone can dive in first.
You want to layer it and start with you, then I'll talk about
Okay, sure. So at the Office of Economic Vitality, we are focused on leveraging our current assets as a community, and those are vast, and we can get into those a little bit later. But what we are charged with doing is creating an economic landscape that is beneficial to all four corners of this community.
Did I say that?
And it doesn't necessarily end with the recruitment of corporate giants such as Amazon or Danfoss Turbocore. We are distilling it down to the local level where we are providing actionable resources for our existing business community. We want to be the go-to economic development agency in our region. And part of that involves us connecting the dots with the community. This person sitting to my left, Dr. Kim Moore, is a stalwart in the community as it relates to economic development, because workforce is a key component to economic development. Making sure that we have folks in our community that are earning livable wages, goes a very long way. It's probably the most important thing we can do in our community. Again, getting folks like Amazon and other large companies here are important because they're creating jobs.
That's right.
But we also need to focus on those folks that have already, planted their stakes here in this community and have stepped out on faith, created jobs, worried about making payroll, worried about making sure they can, hire enough staff to provide the services that they need to take care of not only their families, but their employees' families.
That's right.
So those are some of the things that we work in and we incentivize and we advocate for and we champion on a day-to-day basis.
That's good. Yeah.
I love it, and it's such a great conversation because Keith's whole message actually is a great segue for the work that TCC has committed itself to providing. Starting with that, we've not changed community in our community college name, and that was purposeful. We are only one of two colleges statewide that remain with the community, and it's so important for us that the community understands that the services that we provide, the training that we provide, the awareness and advocacy, that it really is about every aspect of our community, whether it's K through 12 or whether you, for whatever reason, traditional school didn't work for you and adult ed GED becomes a path. Everything that we do is about creating commas and not periods. It is the transition, is the opportunity for elevation. And I would say to people like, hey, do you help people get jobs? I help people get careers. Careers that you can build on. Job, you clock in, you clock out. You may go back to it, you may not. I wanted to be this place that meets you where you are and takes you to where you want to be. and everybody's on ramp and off ramp can look totally different.
Right.
That's okay because we're meeting you where you are. So saying all of that, it's adult ed, GED. I think that's critical. There are so many people that for whatever reason that just didn't have the support, didn't think that they could do it, and that they have a place to where they can shine. I will tell you, over 50% of our GED students ultimately end up pursuing a degree
Wow.
as a result. So when people say you can't, they can, and they can do a whole lot more. That spans from whether you're looking for your first entry into the workforce, we're there for you and working in partnership with our partners like OEV and others to make sure that they have that. Or if you're in middle skill, heck, you're looking for a promotion, or maybe you want to do a 2.0 and transition into something else. TCC allows you to do just that, and we're not just focused on getting the skills. We also work with employers. A lot of people don't know that. We actually provide services to employers, custom solutions across the state of Florida. That could be whether it's consulting, it could be project management. I mean, it just really does run the gamut. And I think we book in that with our support of nonprofits, where we are an anchor institution for the Institute for Nonprofit Innovation, because we realize that a lot of the people that we are serving need that safety net, and were it not for nonprofits, that safety net would not be there. We don't forget about, and I think that's important. I certainly attribute that to the leadership of President Murdaugh and the whole fact that I get to live this piece out of second chances. We believe in that.
Yes.
And because of that, we are the largest contracted workforce provider with Department of Corrections for the state. So we're 8 prisons, providing workforce training, GED, case management, success coach, the same skills that you need to be a success and transition into the workforce. We've since this year, actually at the end of last quarter, are in the single contract with Department of Juvenile Justice. We are the sole provider for what will be statewide services to at-risk youth.
Wow.
So the whole notion of what a community college can do and the solutions that it can provide, that is what TCC in partnership, because our strength really is based off of collaboration.
Yeah.
I'm going to lean on the work that Keith did at FAMU and going into the prisons with me. I'm like, knock, can you do this? And that was where we were providing entrepreneurial services to those who were behind the walls. It says that, one, if you can't get a job, let's create one. You can be a creator.
Yes.
And that is through not just our strength, it is the strength that comes by way of, the connections that we have here in this local community.
I mean, and you work with reentry, you work with
Right.
citizens that are trying to reconnect back into the community economically, socially, spiritually. What does that do for you as you listen to them talk about the resources that their agencies are offering now? Because this is unprecedented. This focus was not
Right.
5, even 7 years ago,
Right.
right? So what does that do for you hearing
But
that?
definitely, when you hear something that these 2 individuals who are doing in my community, you're talking Griffin Heights, you're talking the south side of town, more information like that and programs like that are very applicable.
Right.
It's beneficial. It really makes, the marginalized people feel like, okay, there's some hope. So when I'm listening to Dr. Kim, I'm listening to Dr. Keith talk about all of the programs and all this, because the thing is, like we said earlier, making it plain.
Yeah.
That information like that,
Yes.
dispense with that information, valuable information.
Right.
And the thing that I love to hear to see that it's factoring, you're talking about reentry.
Yeah.
People going to prison, and then they're coming out and they have that information already. They got
Right.
their education, they got that workforce, they got that necessary skill. Then they got the other partnership. How do we get them in housing? How do we get them in these things? Because reentry
Yes.
is so important.
Yes. Yes.
That keeps down them going back. Yeah, thank you. Going back to prison.
Well, and that too, that's a great point, because that is your workforce. And when we talk about the unemployment rate being what it is, fewer people that might be available, because one, you got to compete real hard to get talent now.
That's right.
Where are you going to find them? Well, you got to tap into those places that normally, for whatever reason, maybe didn't believe in second chances.
Right.
I bet they do now.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that works very well.
Yeah.
The way you've all described it and when you put it in. Now, the $1 million questions is dispensing that information
Right.
into the community
That's right.
that there has no hope.
Right.
How do I become a part of that? When you have this, it seems like systematically programs like that has found a way of getting to a stopping point. We talked earlier about the comma, but in
Right.
certain communities, there's a period.
Right.
And that period somehow has matriculated into the lives of the people who really need to benefit from that program, from the services that you all provide. So how do we get that there to the point that they can really hold to it and hold on to it and move with it. That's always been something that's been key to me, especially as a pastor. I'm always looking at those, preaching to the poor. And I'm not just talking financially. I'm talking to the poor in spirit, the poor, their mindset, or they just feel that there's that period. And to hear the programs and how do they make that applicable? How do they hone in on that? Those are so important questions to me, and I'm pretty sure because those are questions that come to me on a day-to-day basis. Pastor Ferg, can I get this? Pastor Ferg, how do I get that? Pastor Ferg, how do I? And sometimes it's disheartening because some of them, they don't know what to do.
Well, and that's a common thing. I mean, I've always believed that it's not a lack of people don't want. I really firmly believe that people want to be better, do better, but they just don't know how to connect to information. And I think it's incumbent upon not only us in our role, which is why you see us out quite a bit, and the same would hold true for faith-based and community-based organizations, that we be an arm and a voice for getting that information out. Awareness is everything, and that's why we count on outlets, especially even like the show. Thank you so much, Christopher, with the work that you do and that you are championing out here to build awareness, because it's not enough to say you have it, but people aren't taking advantage.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I love your statement earlier, and definitely looking to you and Keith to kind of expand even more. Creating commas and not periods. That's a powerful statement, right? Because we're in a different atmosphere. We're just talking about how people worked a job forever.
Yeah.
Right? They were
Yeah.
administrative number 1, and then they moved up to 4, right?
Yeah.
And then they might become a man, but they will work in that agency forever.
Yeah.
That's not the situation in
not
this
at all.
employment market.
No.
And in the past, there's not been a pronounced economic development as a concept was relegated for higher level, higher institutions, and not microeconomic impact, right?
Right.
We knew it would trickle down, right? Somebody gonna roll over me saying it. But we know now that trickle down is a myth, right? So you gotta start at the top, but you also gotta start at the bottom, right? To meet at this middle of economic vibrancy. So in your opinion, where are the opportunity divides and gaps in our community based upon your assessment of our community?
Well, I think one of the most important parts is you talk about our communities, and one project that we'll be unveiling relatively soon at the Office of Economic Vitality is where we're taking we're delineating specific areas in Leon County, Frenchtown, Griffin Heights, South Side, South City, and we are starting with the data, because I think you have a lot of anecdotal information that's going on, and you hear all these things. You got the street committee that has already decided, what's to take place and what the problem is. But we like to approach it from a data-driven decision, because once you understand the data, you can start developing strategies. So what you'll start to see us produce, and you may even see it at our next newsletter, community profile. We started with County Commission District 2.
Right.
And we carved that out and delineated that. And so we're going to be able to tell you about all the demographics that take place. How many people are in that district are living at risk? What the unemployment rate is? How many people own homes? How many people are paying more than 50% of their monthly income in rent? These are all factors that bleed into economic development, because that's where the rubber hits the road. And if we don't have a good handle on data, we don't have a good handle on the solution.
Right.
So those are some of the things that we are starting to develop, and you'll start to see OEV, really again take the lead on producing this data, so we at least have a baseline to where we know we're starting, and then what programs will we be able to develop based on that information? Though that data informs how we move forward with policies.
What we just saying that policy y'all in the spirit today. If you listening, y'all, we in the spirit, okay? And I think it's important. You just identified a significant gap, right? Which is the data. The information is a huge gap, right? Because you can't dictate outcomes unless you have sufficient information.
And let me tell you something about data. Data is literally worth more as a commodity than gold right now. And people don't realize the power. Once you get that data, it empowers you to do so much more. It empowers you to advocate for yourself. It empowers you to build consensus around these certain issues. It empowers you to become a lot more politically active.
Right.
So we want to start with the data.
That's good.
That's
really
good.
we were talking
That's
about
good.
it earlier. That is so important. Policies, because policy, when most people don't understand policy, they don't understand what's next.
Mhm.
The only thing that I've ever heard is I'm not eligible, I'm not qualified, or I don't qualify because of 1, 2, and 3. But when you have the data in front of you, we're able to work around that and work through that so that we can create policies that really benefit people that really need it. Instead of hitting these blockades and getting up these walls and getting up all these other things that come into play. Because once you get too many brick walls, you know what happens to a person? They lose hope. They walk away.
Right.
And then they become a product of society that we just don't want to deal with. You know what I mean? Not because this is the choice, but when it comes down to surviving and living, then they're going to make those choices and those unnecessary mistakes, as I like to use, unnecessary mistakes, and that may end up in prison. But when you talk about the data, and we know how to use the data, know what to bring from that, and we're able to matriculate that information back to those is going to benefit, then guess what? What we've done, we've lifted that blockade, we've opened the curtain, and now we can actually show them that we can go from being broke, to having more hope. You know what I mean?
Right.
I used to be a rapper back in the day. So,
I heard the rhyme on the sheriff ship there.
but that's so important. Yeah, because I went to the studio next. So anyway, but nevertheless, that's the truth, and I like that because most people don't know that that data matters.
It does.
The research matters. It really does. You can't get from point A to point B without having that necessary entity. I wanted to add that to that. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think with the data, you're experiencing this right now in terms of trying to transition a workforce that's not skilled for the opportunities that are in the community.
Correct.
And that's how hard is that, right?
I will tell you, this is the best time of my career. Why? Because what you've known for forever. And if you don't connect the two, you will not have a workforce. And if you don't have a workforce, your economic development won't happen either.
Right.
So I love the awareness and the light that's shining on talent and why it matters. Most employers, if you were to talk to them a couple of years ago, they didn't have to worry about the advertising. People are going to knock on their door. They're going to be flooded with applications. That's not the case.
Right.
They got to figure out where it comes from. You got to figure out whether the wages that you were once paying, whether it's appropriate now. Is it a livable wage?
Right.
You thought it was a wage and you thought it was fine. You thought you didn't have to offer benefits or whatever the case may be. And the same, people are understanding their value. Now, some people are being overvalued in terms of, but they understand it. So I think data is absolutely critical because most people, and I try and explain this to them, that is also what we use in our decision making to figure out programs, whether it makes sense based off of the data that Keith and his team will provide to us, whether this is going to be a short-term need that we are experiencing with a specific industry, or is it going to be a long-term, whether it makes sense for the college to invest at that level.
Right.
The other part of what we are using the data for is to inform the business community about what their role is in investing and creating talent.
Yeah.
It's all hands on. Everybody has to help and aid in creating this workforce, whether your small business, existing business thinking about growing, or those that we seek to attract. If you're not prepared to invest in what the model looks like, whether that's serving, I know everybody doesn't have money, but whether that's serving on an advisory council, giving feedback to these institutions, Lively, Kaiser, TCC, FAMU, wherever, but making sure that you're weighing in, you got to do your part. With that said, there are lots of employers that are doing their part. And I'd like to do a shout out to Sunshine Health, because Sunshine Health, who's based out of Fort Lauderdale, look at them. They are the largest Medicaid processor in the state of Florida. They asked, and they came to TCC for a single project, and they funded for 1 year all of the healthcare training for any Gadsden County resident at no cost: tuition, books, fees, uniforms. They've since, I asked, it worked well. Could we expand it? Now they've committed to 5-year relationship with TCC, underwritten.
Yeah.
TCC, so for Gadsden County residents, Leon County residents, and Wakulla County residents. So looking for opportunities, and they exist, but you got to be data informed,
Right.
That's right.
data driven,
That's right.
and why the investment matters. And are you going to be accountable
Mhm. Right.
when you get the resources.
That's right.
Yeah.
Listen to me. I am loving the fact that
Yeah.
you are stating that this is all an investment. Because OEV is a citizen investment.
Absolutely.
TCC is a state-funded investment.
Correct.
You know, for the most part, y'all get grants and y'all,
Right,
y'all
right,
ball,
right.
but for the most part, it's a state-funded investment.
Right.
And I think that as we move to the next break, and if you just caught us, you catching the conscious check. If you ain't woke yet, just stay tuned. All
That's
right,
right.
you about to get a little bit more of a rude awakening. We're gonna take a moment. And we're going to take us a little station break so that we can acknowledge some of our great sponsors and partners for our upcoming Tallahassee prayer breakfast with the Greg James Ministries. But stay tuned with Conscious Check. We're talking economic development, workforce innovation, and all the stuff. So stay tuned.
That's awesome.
Listen, we know it's a fire hydrant, and I see y'all's questions. I do see y'all's questions. And Stephanie Milton, if you're on here, let me see if she's on here. Hey Stephanie, how are you doing? We saw your question. She had a question. She says she has a bachelor's degree
Right.
and can't find work.
What's your
She has a job as a caregiver, been working in this field for 8 years and trying to change. Professional problems, doing so, working through substance abuse issues. How can she find reemployment? And I know you have job skill programs through TCC that are available for people for her.
Absolutely. So, and I always tell people it's not all retraining and training is not always a solution. Sometimes it's a lot about knowing where to go and who's hiring. So the first stop, I mean, we do it. We publish it every month. HotOccupationsNow.com and go there. It is it's the top employers that have the most advertised positions every month. I tell you the skills you need for the occupation that they have and who the employers are. Additionally, if she finds that she needs some, hands-on assistance, one of two ways, I'm always happy to help community folks. You can send me your resume. Happy to we can share with her my email address, or we can certainly work with our partners there at Career Source to get that really can help her with the hands-on and day-to-day and brush up her resume and redirect as well.
I feel like, and this is an exclusive conversation here for all of our streaming audience viewers, I think we need to be a community-based, just employment forum,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we think about, right? So people can find their way in the ecosystem, whatever they are. If they're a micro enterprise, if they're a business, whatever they are. Are we on? All right. Listen, if you are just tuning in, you are catching the after conversation to the commercial, y'all. We got into it with one of the questions from one of the audience. Thank you, Stephanie Milton, for submitting your question. We tried to answer it, but I think, there's a lot. It's a big old conversation. If you're just tuning in, you're with Christy Henry and Pastor Rudy Ferguson.
Yo.
And we are here with our guest and chief economic engines and leaders and champions, Mr. Keith Bowers, director with Tallahassee Leon County Office of Economic Vitality, and Dr. Kimberly Moore from Tallahassee Community College, who serves as the vice president for workforce innovation. Now, y'all better not say workforce development, because that ain't all she do. All right.
We do some creative,
That-
some new stuff that never existed.
Okay, they create solutions. They don't just develop stuff. They create something. All right. Listen, this is an exciting time, right? As we said earlier, the job market has shifted.
Yes.
The business market has shifted.
Right.
Everything is about reach and return.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
Right? So when you got Starbucks willing to pay tuition for students, you know something done shifted, right? When they unionize the Starbucks workers, and as we said earlier, you still got to work though,
That's right.
right?
You still got to work, but you got 5 generations in the workforce now, which have totally different thoughts and expectations and wants than ever before. I mean, you got, when I think about, our newest generation in terms of how they view work, it is certainly not to clock in 8 to 5.
That's right.
It is that they will be an entrepreneur. They want greater flexibility. They want the quality of life. You talk about work-life balance, work-life integration. They want all of that, and they're demanding that. They are very open to gig work, where you're like, hey, you don't need, that's not the thought or notion about having benefits. Benefits is not something that they see on their check
That's right.
on Fridays or whatever the case may be.
That's
And
it.
because that we other generations valued
Right.
benefits.
Right.
That's our protection. That's
Right.
our protection. Give me a pension plan.
Mhm.
That's not what they're
Safety.
thinking. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
It is totally so. Unless you embrace this notion of really understanding people, how
Mhm.
novel, and the people that's in that workforce, and what it is that they need in
Mhm.
order to give you the best. Because just because you were used to seeing a job at 40 hours a week and one person do it, I tell people because of the quality of life that they want, you may have job sharing.
Mhm.
Somebody does 20 hours, the other person does 20, because that's what they're requiring, and because they want to do other things.
Right.
Their gig work, their, these, I call it hobbies that they turn into their jobs.
Side hustle.
Yeah, the side
Yeah,
hustle,
hustle,
right?
yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That's understanding that all of that is happening in the workforce, and not to mention what COVID did for us with
Right.
remote working.
Right.
People are like, what?
Right.
That's a thing?
I don't have to
Yeah.
leave home.
What?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
huge
why
thing.
am I going to your job? So
And on the flip side, Keith, businesses were saying, why do I have to lease these buildings?
correct.
Absolutely.
Why do I have to develop facilities?
Right.
Yeah,
Why do I need to house work?
yeah,
Right? When
Yeah.
I can let them house their work,
yeah,
Right.
I can reduce my exposure.
yeah.
It's just a lot, right? It's a lot. And so I think where you're going here is basically, yes, it's sexy. Things are great where people can have a very profitable side hustle. They can work a job. They can, job satisfaction is a little bit at an all-time low.
Right.
All right.
Right.
People just aren't satisfied with being in a position. They
Right.
want to make a difference. They want to own who they are and work their
Right.
job. But Keith, the intrepid place of owning your job, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's this conversation about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship that we're going to get into. But I want to get into this first because you talked about data before we went to the
Yeah.
break.
Right.
University of Florida, for all of y'all in Tallahassee who are giving me the roll eyes right now. They have an institute called the Schemberg Institute, and this group is basically the people who set the cadence for data as it relates to affordability,
Right.
availability of statewide programs that are used to fund housing that creates within itself an economic vitality component. Because we know for every new construction, for every new home that's built, that creates how many jobs?
Right.
An average of 30 jobs, 30 transactions. They have most recently released their affordability averages for Leon County. And that inflation and the cost burden is off the charts. So while we're talking about work and we're talking about, owning your work and economic satisfaction,
Right.
are we experiencing now a high level based upon this inflation and based upon this cost of living, tremendous cost burden, right? Unprecedented cost burden.
Mhm.
Costs more to live in a home. It costs
Right,
more to
right.
rent a house. It
Right,
costs
right.
more because even with the scenario you gave earlier, people had a mortgage, so their rent was pretty much set for the rest of their life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But people don't own no more.
Yeah,
They
that's
rent,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so in that realm, what should our energies be focused to hedge our community against the negative impacts economically of this current global, national, and local phenomenon as it relates to this inflation and this rising burden of costs?
Well, one of the things that we promote as a community is that we have actively engaged in candid conversations about affordability. We have a affordable housing committee that reports directly to the city and the county.
Mhm.
And I think right now it's unprecedented at the resources that are being devoted to affordability.
Mhm.
But we're not in this alone. I mean, this is a national crisis, and I'll use the word crisis. It's a national crisis. One of the things that we are looking at is, how do we activate more businesses around the issues pertaining to affordable housing? I think businesses have to get involved and understand that this is a crisis. If they want to attract employees,
Mm-hmm.
they need to lean into this conversation.
Okay, say that again now. Say that louder.
If they want to attract employees,
Mm-hmm.
they have to lean into this conversation because that is the lifeblood of their business.
Mhm.
The other part of it is, our affordability here in Tallahassee a lot of it has to do with developable lots.
Right.
You know, the scarcity of lots for development. So, you know, I think sometimes we have to put away our conventional way of thinking of development and how it integrates with the community, because all of that has been upended.
Mhm.
So I think, you know, we really have to start to be a lot more creative in pulling out different tools if we're really going to address the issues of affordable housing.
Mhm.
Multifamily housing is one
Yes.
one tool that, because you get a lot of density,
Mhm.
you get the economies of scale.
Right.
But you know, we're Southerners. We want a yard. We want a
Right.
fence.
Where's
we
my
want-
yard?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So I just think the shift is going to, a seismic shift is going to have to take place for us to really address the issues of affordability.
Right.
Interest rates are at an all-time high in terms of what I can remember.
Mhm.
And you know, if we were to sell our houses right now, we may have a lot of equity, but where are we going to go?
That's a question now. That's a question.
So
Yeah.
again, I think it's going to take a community approach, and a lot of folks are trying to, you know, lay this at the doorstep of the, you know, elected officials and financial institutions, but it's far more reaching than that.
I appreciate that statement.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Because I heard you lean into the employer assisted housing initiatives conversation a little bit. You know, I just took your whole little statement to the other day. But talk about that. 'Cause
So from an education perspective, our role becomes both educator and one of advocacy. Advocacy in that we recognize that there is a need for, oftentimes in a lot of industries, to offer a competitive wage.
Okay.
A competitive wage that allows for your workforce to, one, be your workforce. Because I'll give an example. A lot of our employers, I remember I did this a number of years ago with Early Learning Coalition. I asked how many employers had workforce employees that were currently receiving subsidized childcare. And because it wasn't what they weren't providing the service, but their employees were getting the child care services from Early Learning Coalition. When we did that number, it was a high percentage. It may have been 60-70%. And what's critical about that is that employers needed to understand that they would not have the workforce that allowed them to be successful were it not for the nonprofit Early Learning Coalition investing on their behalf so that they can get the workforce. So we really, I would say to a large degree, have not done the best job of explaining everything that goes into having a workforce, housing being one of them. So for us right now, with inflation and everything else, there are certain programs that you will, even if there's demand, TCC will choose not to train in.
Mhm.
Why? Because the person's not going to earn a wage that they can live off. They're still going to have to do 2 and 3 jobs.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to
Right.
me, doesn't make sense to President Murdoch, doesn't make sense to our board of trustees of why would we be walking someone in, hey, celebrate your success, but now you got 2, 3 jobs and you're still trying to figure out life.
Right.
We really want you to be better off. So that's the advocacy piece
That's good.
that we then want to take to employers. We're not, you know, and we understand from them, you know, 70+% of our businesses have 10 or fewer employees. So these folks aren't rich. They're some of them probably not even taking a paycheck. So in that case, we have to make sure that the workers that we're creating for them have the skills that are going to improve the standing of their business in such a way that they are going to be competitive and that they do grow. When they grow, they're able to gain additional revenue. So it has to be a win-win. So that's the education, and then it's the advocacy. That's where we're sitting on this issue when we think about inflation,
Mhm.
because the numbers are real. The
That's
numbers
right.
are real. Yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. And I think as we have these conversations, as local contingents with issues that are federally of concern,
Mhm.
you know, maybe the idea here is, hey, how do we approach this cost burden conversation? And if you're listening, the cost burden basically is 30% of your income should go toward your housing expense,
Right, right.
but you're spending 50. So what's the
Yeah,
difference between
yeah.
that 30 and 50 on average for
Yeah.
the regular citizen based
Yeah.
upon what their income is,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's those are the type of averages, you know, and that can go across the board to gas, it can go to childcare, all those different things.
Right.
And so I think that the thing here is to figure out, you know, what is our federal government partner doing, or relevant agency doing, to maybe advocate for tax breaks, which you see as a huge benefit to businesses, to say, hey, okay, if I'm going to assist with housing expense, right, over and beyond what this
Right.
job pays for you.
Right.
If the housing expense is this much and you earn this much, the difference between what you can afford and what it is, we will underwrite that expense, right? If there was a tax break that would actually benefit the business for doing that, that would be huge. But I'm getting into the policy conversation. Y'all just throw that out. But I think this goes into the next question. Is it a challenge, Keith and Kim, for prospective corporate interests to find skilled workers to hire here in Tallahassee, Leon County? Do we have the business diversity
Depends
necessary?
on the wage of which they are offering. And if their wage is higher, then no, you don't have a problem. The challenge that it creates is that you then end up cannibalizing and you're taking them from other businesses who cannot compete at that wage.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think if you're trying to track them and you got the great package, no.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
But we have to. That's where alignment and data matters, both from I call it a K through 20 kind of pipeline. That we have to be in tune with what is happening, even with what Office of Economic Vitality they're seeking to attract to our community, so that we can plan for that talent need. And if we know that that is coming down the pipeline, how do we then prepare and make sure we're training individuals, because we know that there's going to need to be a backfill. Those people are likely to go there, and some of it we have to get used to this. Some of it we need to be thinking about where there's transition into the workforce. Like, for example, prior to the economy being what it was, we would see, especially in our rural areas, a lot of adults working in jobs that would normally be filled by youth and teenagers.
Right.
That's a problem.
Uh-huh.
That's a problem, because if you don't have anything to do, then they're doing what they don't need to do,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So if that's the case, there has to be a way that we have jobs that are perceived, I believe, that are entry level in nature, so that people can get their first foot in the door for employment, to gain the skills that they need. And there needs to be then better job, better ways, because hey, now you got more education, you got additional skills and high skill highways that everybody gets to participate in the ladder. The ladder can't stop at one rung.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good.
The business diversity.
Mhm.
So Kim's talking about the availability of human resources to fill jobs for prospective employers. Is there business diversity here so that prospective employers would want to come to Tallahassee? Are there suppliers here? Are there, niche?
Right. Well, that's what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. My chief responsibility is being able to articulate Tallahassee, Leon County's value proposition.
Okay.
When we're trying to attract a company, mid-sized company or a large company here, all I have in my arsenal are workforce, educational attainment, inherent community resources. We've got a phenomenal community college. We've got a premier historically Black university here in FAMU.
Right.
We've got a preeminent research college with FSU.
Right.
And all those things speak talent.
Mhm.
I often joke that Tallahassee's largest export are four-year degree students.
Say that.
Yeah.
And one thing, we can't retain them all.
Right.
But again, we're looking to try to connect the dots and try to make that transition from when you graduate, when you cross the stage. There should be some companies here looking to hire talent, because that's a big point. But back to the business recruitment, we have done I would say a great job in attracting businesses here, because Tallahassee has so many diverse assets and resources. One, we're a very business friendly community. We've invested in our ecosystem. We've invested in education. We have tried to basically bridge the gap with entities like, with circumstances where talent is looking for a home, and those homes are looking for talent.
Right.
So being able to really define, what skill sets are required, and demystify the hiring process by, being, very transparent and intentional about recruitment issues or incentives and implementations that we're trying to affect. But when I talk to folks about Tallahassee, I start with, we're the smartest community in the state of Florida.
That's
Right.
true.
In the
Yeah.
state of Florida,
Yeah.
hands down. We are conveniently located to 4 major metropolitan areas.
Mhm.
We have a relatively low cost of living index.
Yes, we
here
do.
in town. And we have diversity. And I think diversity is you can't discount diversity. I think diversity is one of the most I would say one of the most important things that we can articulate, because people want to know, if I'm moving to Tallahassee, what is the climate like?
Right,
Right.
Are my kids going to fit in here? Are
right.
there, enough people that quite candidly look like me and think like me
Yes,
in this area? And I think we've done a really good job of cultivating that here in Tallahassee. Tallahassee was, and when you talk about Tallahassee, people say, "Whoa, that's a great place to raise a family." We need to add that comma.
Right.
Very good. I
Add
like
that
that.
and say it's a great place to raise a business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah,
Because-
I love that. Yeah.
Because it is. We've got the both city and the county leadership, elected officials, focusing on economic vitality for our community, to the point where we are probably the only community that decided to tax itself and dedicate 12% of that tax specifically to economic development.
Mhm.
So that gives us a huge advantage. That provides some incentives for us to go out there and attract. And one of the things when I interview for the position that I currently have, part of my pitch to the interviewing committee is, I think we need to be a lot more intentional in attracting African American and Hispanic owned companies.
I love
to
it.
this community.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Intentional, I like that.
Intentional.
Intentional.
We need to be intentional, because when you look at the data, demographically, Black women are starting businesses at a higher rate than
Yes, they are.
any other demographic.
That's right. It's all
And
about
they're finding success.
That's
They're
right.
finding success. So I think that's what you'll start to see out of the Office of Economic Vitality. We're becoming a lot more intentional about the types of companies that we're recruiting. We obviously want to make sure it's a good fit for our community,
Right.
but at the same time, we need to be a good fit for those prospects.
That's good.
Listen, y'all. I told y'all we weren't gonna be able to cover all this.
Right.
It's 2:57. We got 3 minutes left, but I do want to end with this one question, and this could be our what you call your benedictive
Benediction.
benedictive question.
I'm gonna let you come to the church and do that.
Listen, rate of employment is low based on the tremendous economic data platform that the Office of Economic Vitality provides to this community on its website. 2.8%, I believe, which is down lower than what it was the last quarter. They provide monthly and quarterly projections. But what strides are being taken to include and make sure that what am I trying to say? That vulnerable communities that still go to daily labor to get a paycheck and are perpetuating that vicious cycle, those stagnated employed residents who have 2 or 3 kids, that job ain't gonna afford them to raise in a way that is a benefit to the community as a whole. What strides are being taken to make and ensure that we have an ecosystem that integrates those most vulnerable communities? You talked to it a little bit about the data, making sure that it's focused and targeted in areas of interest. But there's a whole ecosystem that you guys have just laid out for us, how you get here, find your career, find your purpose, find your path, how you equate that to economic vitality and attainment. What are we doing to ensure that we are, or what recommendations would you have to make sure that we have greater outreach and collaboration to make sure that all Tallahasseans have an opportunity to live a better life?
I think, first of all, we have to recognize who they are. So if your unemployment rate, I have 2.7, but 2.8%, and you are realizing that, hey, the people that are here, because a number of people that are here, they are working remotely in other places. So you can't even count all of that as being part of your workforce. So you got to look at it's hidden talent. So the persons with different abilities. You got to look at the persons that are transitioning second chance efforts. How can we be more of a second chance community? That goes into it. You even got to look at those that are underemployed. You got to look at those that lack a high school diploma or GED, if that's going to be our bar of what it is that we need for education. When we know these, how are we communicating? Do we know, have we inventoried all of the groups that have or play a role and engage with those populations? When we do that, that's where our information sharing needs to go. We need to be direct. We need to, one of the programs that we're getting ready to roll out is going to be solely focused on Southside. We partner with the private sector, Sunshine Health, and we'll be able to utilize the space that they have on Southside.
Right.
Why? Because we want to take it to the people. Why? Because sometimes they just feel more comfortable being where they are to get the services or the information. So as a community, when we're experiencing what we're experiencing, I count it as an area of opportunity.
Right.
It is, it is not dire, it's opportunity, and we need to embrace it, and we need to join forces on making sure that whatever we create now, because the unemployment rate is low, that we continue that throughout. That's what I believe will strengthen the entire community, and that everybody gets to benefit and grow and be in a different position.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Awesome.
Yeah. I would say our main tool in making sure that there's a economy that includes everyone is our Minority Women and Small Business Enterprise Program. Through certification, you can certify your minority-owned business and take advantage of the contracting opportunities. Prime example, Tallahassee Police Department is under construction right now. There is a aspirational goal for 23% participation by minority and women-owned businesses. It is estimated that project is going to be $90 million. So that's close to $20 million that is being allocated to minority and women-owned businesses. That's real economic development. That is building capacity. And we have decided that is going to be the aspirational goals on all projects that involve 1 cent of either local, when I say local, the city of Tallahassee, Leon County, or the Blueprint dollars. And so when you start to add up all these projects that we have, it's game changing, it's life changing.
That's right. So we are out of time. I told y'all this was gonna happen. But we will commit to continuing Pastor Ferguson's conversation, because I think this is where the rubber meets the road. We can talk about economic development all day, but what people want to know is, where are the jobs?
Right.
Where are the opportunities that back into me being able to financially live my best life in this city?
That's right.
Right.
That's
So we're gonna close out this conversation, but we are not gonna close out this pursuit of making sure that this information gets out to the community, and that we work in partnership with these leaders to ensure that the folks you work with, Pastor Ferguson, and the folks that I come in contact with every day, know that they are in mind.
That's
When
right.
it comes to the economic plan for our city.
I love it. I hope you all made it. You made it plain. That was so important, because a lot of people, they don't understand. And when they don't understand the language, the lingo, they don't understand, then they lose hope. Because they don't think it pertains to them. Even though it's for them. But the fact that you both doctors, I'm calling you doctors, because you're educated.
Speaking of existence.
You got this thing, and you really brought that. And that's really good to know. Working in the Griffin Heights neighborhood, TCC worked with us, and that's something that I believe to be so important, making the community applicable. And making it important. That's the impact that we're looking for. So again, thank you for allowing me to be a co-host.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Listen, we are truly blessed. If you heard something today, you're continuing interest to find out more about, please hit us up. We are Conscious Check with Christy Henry on the Greg James Community Show platform. We'll be here every month on the second Wednesday of the month from 2 to 3 p.m. with information of impact to aid and abet your economic vitality within our community. Thank you for tuning in.
Awesome. This was good.
Thank
you for the
And if you're
invitation.
listening live, thank y'all for being here. We're closing out the conversation, but not closing out the opportunity. All right. So hit us up. We'll make sure you get the information you need to live your best life here. Thank y'all so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Awesome. So I like that.
Very good.
About the more opportunities for women, businesses.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you said it, I was thinking about, wow, I need to stay home now.
Is that what you were thinking?
Stay home now. I'm teasing.
Katrina, he ain't mean that.
Oh, we still live.
Katrina's typing it right
Look at
Yeah.
you, just every type of response in this stuff. Thank you all for tuning in to begin this broadcast.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, all right.